Khalifa, he ordered the Khalid to go and collect zakat from the people. Khalid went around collecting zakat. Anyone who doesn't get pay the zakat gets beheaded. If you pay the zakat, you don't get beheaded. If you don't, you get beheaded. Malik ibn Nuwayra was one of the greatest companions of Rasulullah and of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Malik ibn Nuwayra used to collect taxes for Rasulullah. He was from the tribe of Yarbu'. He used to collect taxes on the behalf of Rasulullah from the tribe of Hanzala. Malik ibn Nuwayra, when Khalid came and said to him, you've got to give taxes, he said, I'm not going to give taxes to that Khalifa. I give taxes to the man chosen as Ghadir. I'm not going to give to him. We won't give. He said, you won't give? No. He beheaded him and the whole tribe. And when they beheaded the tribe, do you know who was with Khalid ibn Walid, who was under him in the command? Abu Qatada. Abu Qatada went back to the first Khalifa. He said to him, you see your commander what he's done? He said, what has he done? He said, your commander has killed a person who used to collect taxes on behalf of Rasulullah. He said, who? He said, Malik ibn Nuwayra. He said, he killed Malik? Yes. When Umar ibn al-Khattab heard Khalid had killed Malik, he said to Abu Bakr, punish him. He said, what do you mean? He said, punish him. We can't have a rule for one and another rule for another. The man has done this. And then he said to Abu Bakr, do you know what else he's done? He said, what is it? He said, the next night he's with his wife, Layla. In Islam, you have to leave an iddah period. You don't go with the wife the next night, do you? The next night he's with Layla. Punish him like we punish everybody else. He said, how can I punish a man who Allah praised his sword? Commander of the Muslim army. If the verse is telling us, Ulil Amr are the commanders, this is the commander I have to obey? A commander who goes and kills a Sahabi of Rasulullah and then goes with his wife the next night? A commander who has that type of behavior? If you are telling us Ulil Amr are the commanders, Umar ibn Sa'ad is a commander. Umar ibn Sa'ad on the 10th of Muharram is a commander. On the night of the 11th of Muharram, do you know what Umar ibn Sa'ad ordered the soldiers? He said to them, oh horse riders, ride your horses and trample on the body of Aba Abdullah. That's a Muslim commander, isn't it? It's a Muslim commander. If the Quran, when it said, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasula wa ulil amr minkum, the ulil amr are the commanders, I've got to obey commanders like this. Islamic history is full of commanders who claim to represent Islam, but had some of the most despicable behavior about them. That's the third opinion we rejected. The fourth opinion, the ulil amr is the whole ummah. Al-Fakhr al-Razi says, when God says obey God, obey the Prophet and the ulil amr, he says the ulil amr must be infallible. Because God is infallible, the Prophet is infallible, therefore the ulil amr must be infallible. He said therefore the ulil amr is the whole ummah. What do you mean the whole ummah? He said because Rasulullah said, my ummah will not unite on error. It's interesting. Rasulullah said, my ummah will not unite on error. Therefore the ulil amr is my ummah. This opinion is quite absurd, to tell you the truth. Do you know why? If you get 200 cows and 200 cows, you're going to make one horse? That's honest. If I now gather the whole minds of the whole ummah, I'm going to have an infallible mind? Iqbal used to say, bring me the mind of 200 donkeys. It does not come near the thought of one human being. Why does he say that? He's saying that your opinion, you're saying that the whole ummah is the ulil amr. So what, we get all of the ummah together, we get all their minds together, we're going to make one infallible opinion? What type of logic is that? What type of logic? As in when Rasulullah said, my ummah will not unite on error. Do you know what he meant? He meant while there's a ma'soom in my ummah, then the whole ummah cannot unite on error. That's the point. While there's a ma'soom in my ummah, then the whole ummah can't unite on error. Otherwise, this ummah united on error 100 times. You think when they fought Ali ibn Abi Talib at Jamal, didn't they unite on error? When they fought Abu Abdullah in Karbala, didn't they unite on error? As in when you're saying that ulil amr is the whole ummah and that the ummah doesn't unite on error. This Muslim ummah many times united on error. But when there's a ma'soom present, he makes it clear what the difference is between right and wrong. That's the fourth opinion. The fifth opinion is the opinion of the school of Ahlul Bayt. That the ulil amr are the imams of Ahlul Bayt. That when Allah says to you, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, please understand the analysis. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasula wa ulil amr minkum. Allah is saying, obey God, obey the Prophet and the leaders from amongst you. This was a question posed to our sixth Imam. Someone came to him and said to him, why aren't the names of the Imams mentioned in the Quran? And the sixth Imam replied by saying, that is the number of units which you pray in Salah mentioned in the Quran? I pray Salat al-Dhuhr 4 rak'ah, Salat al-Asr 4 rak'ah, Maghrib 3, Isha 4, Fajr 2. Is it in the Quran? He said no. He said, where is it? He said, it's in the Hadith. He then asked him, is the fact you've got to pay 2.5% zakat on your earnings a year in the Quran? He said, no. He said, where is it? He said, in the Hadith. Is the fact that you must do tawaf of the Kaaba 7 times in the Quran? He said, no. He said, then where is it? He said, in the Hadith. He said, likewise, the Imam's names are not in the Quran, but they are in the Hadith. But the verse for the Imam's names is Surah 4, verse 59. That when Allah revealed the verse, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ati'u Allah wa ati'u al-Rasula wa ulil amr, he said the ulil amr are Ali ibn Abi Talib and Hassan ibn Ali and Hussein ibn Ali and Ali ibn al-Hussein and Muhammad ibn Ali and Ja'far ibn Muhammad, Musa ibn Ja'far, Ali ibn Musa, Muhammad ibn Ali, Ali ibn Muhammad, Hassan ibn Ali, wal Hujjat ibn al-Hassan. That here clearly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, obey God, obey the Prophet and the leaders from amongst you. He says, we are the leaders from amongst you. In another hadith, Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari comes to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, who are these ulil amr, who Allah has said obedience to them is the same as obedience to Rasulullah? Jabir said, these ulil amr are my sons from Fatima. And then he mentioned Ali, Hassan, Hussein, Ali ibn al-Hussein. Then he said, Muhammad al-Baqir, who you will meet, Jabir. And that's why Jabir met Imam al-Baqir after Karbala. And he said to him, Ya Jabir, send my salams to Muhammad al-Baqir. That's why you find here on the verse, what is the verse implying? The verse is implying that when Allah tells me to obey the Prophet, it's because the Prophet is infallible. Likewise, when he tells me to obey the ulil amr, it's because the ulil amr are infallible as well. Notice in the Arabic of the verse, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ati'u Allah wa ati'u al-Rasula wa ulil amr. Why doesn't Allah say, ati'u Allah wa ati'u al-Rasul wa ati'u ulil amr? Why does God say, obey God, obey the prophets and the leaders? Not obey God, obey the prophets and obey the leaders. The wow in the middle of Rasul and Ulil Amr indicates that Ulil Amr and Rasul, their obedience is exactly the same. You don't need to say Ati'u again. All you need to put is a wow between Rasul and Ulil Amr. That you know you obey the Prophet, now automatically you must obey the Ulil Amr after him. Somebody replied back with an interesting reply. They used the verse against me. They said, you said the verse, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allah wa ati'u al-Rasula wa ulil amr minkum. You said, obey Allah, obey the Prophet and the leaders from amongst you. But the verse continues, فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ إِن كُنتُمْ تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. But if you dispute over an issue, return the issue back to Allah and the Prophet. Do you know what they said to me? They said, why doesn't he say, return the issue back to Allah and the Prophet and the Ulil Amr? It's a good point. It's a sharp point. Because the verse says, obey God, obey the Prophet and the Ulil Amr. But when you dispute over an issue, return it back to Allah and the Prophet. So the person said, you see, the Ulil Amr aren't that important that you say that we must. What you have got there wrong is this, is that when two Muslims dispute with each other, they must return the issue back to the origin of revelation. The Imams of Ahlul Bayt don't bring revelation, they only protect revelation. When Allah said return it back to Allah and His Prophet, He was saying that when Muslims dispute, return it back to where the wahi originated and who the wahi went to. In the religion of Islam, we don't believe the Imams bring in law. We say the Imams of Al Muhammad protect Islamic law. Rasulullah is the one who brought in law. Rasulullah is the one who brought the wahi. Allah sent him the wahi. When the Quran said, فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ. It didn't need to mention ulil amr, because all it's saying to you, whenever you have a dispute, return it back to the origin of revelation. And the origin of revelation is Allah and His Prophet. That's why in this one verse, you have nas, you have isma, you have ilm. One verse. You have Allah choosing, you have infallibility, and you have knowledge. Do you know why? Because Allah, when He tells me to obey Rasulullah, it's because He's chosen Rasulullah, isn't it? When Allah has chosen Rasulullah, it's because Rasulullah is pure, isn't it? When Rasulullah is chosen, it's because He's the most knowledgeable, isn't it? That wow next to Rasulullah means that whoever's after them is exactly the same. That they are chosen by nas. And if obedience to them is the same as Rasulullah, it means they must be ma'soom in the same way as Rasulullah. And that's why I tell you, may Allah bless the soul of Allama Tabatabai. He has a line in Al-Mizan on this, which is, as in it's unbelievable. You can't get lines like that unless you are inspired. Do you know what he says? He says, look, everywhere in the Quran where Allah asks you to obey, He always puts the condition that those people who you obey, if they disobey, then this is what you must do. For example, God tells us you have to obey your parents, doesn't He, in the Quran? But then in the next verse He says, but if your parents disobey me, then you disobey them. He says the only obedience in the Quran where Allah does not warn you of disobedience is the ulil amr. In the verse on parents, Allah says, Luqman says to his son, you have to obey your mother, your parents. But then Luqman tells his son that if you see us disobeying Allah, then disobey us. If Allah thought the ulil amr could disobey Him, He would have put the condition, but if the ulil amr disobey me, then disobey them. But the only group of people Allah never mentioned disobedience next to is the ulil amr, indicating that these ulil amr can never go against my commands, and therefore they must be infallible like Muhammad was infallible, and that I have chosen them like I chose Muhammad, and that their knowledge is exactly like Muhammad's knowledge, but that their roles differ. Rasulullah brought the knowledge, their role is to protect the knowledge. That's why whenever anybody asks you why is Imamat important, you reply by saying, my Prophet brought the revelation, my Imams protected the interpretation. And that's why when Allah says obey them, it means in every aspect of your life you give complete obedience towards these Imams. Because these Imams are seen as the embodiment of God's knowledge on earth and the embodiment of God's wisdom on earth. They are the treasures of His wisdom and the gardens of His knowledge. And indeed your role when you obey them is that you act like them, in the way Ali al-Akbar acted like his grandfather. Ali al-Akbar, without a shadow of doubt, the hadith says, in similarity to Rasulullah, in what? In khalq, in khuluq, in mantiq.